When Ravi moved to the city, he was filled with hope. Everything looked new, bright, and full of promise. He had finally landed a job at a big marketing firm, something he had worked toward for years. The first morning, he stood in front of the tall glass building with his worn briefcase in hand, taking a deep breath before stepping inside. He told himself this was the start of a new chapter, one where he could build something meaningful. Inside, everything felt fast-paced. People moved quickly, typing, talking, carrying coffee cups and folders. Ravi's heart raced as he was introduced to his new team. They smiled politely, though some seemed distracted. His manager, Lisa, shook his hand and said, "Welcome aboard," with a quick glance at his resume. "Let's see what you've got," she added, her tone polite but distant. Ravi spoke softly, thanking her for the opportunity. His accent was noticeable, thick but clear. He had studied English for years, but he still carried the rhythm of his homeland in his words. He noticed Lisa's raised eyebrow, though she said nothing. It was a small thing, but it made him uneasy. Over the first few days, Ravi worked hard to learn everything: new systems, team workflows, and client accounts. He stayed late reading reports and taking notes. While others left at 5, he often remained at his desk until the cleaners came by. He didn't mind. He believed that hard work would make people see his value. At first, things went fine. His co-workers were friendly enough, though they didn't talk much beyond small talk. Lisa was a sharp, confident woman who liked to be in control. She ran meetings quickly, and her words carried authority, but Ravi started noticing small things that bothered him. Whenever he spoke in meetings, she would interrupt him or repeat his ideas in her own words as if they were hers. And once, when he pronounced a word slightly differently, she chuckled and said, "I'm sorry, could you say that again? I just love your accent." The others laughed, not in a cruel way, but it still stung. Ravi smiled politely, even though it hurt inside. He had faced this before in smaller ways, but never in a professional setting. He didn't want to seem sensitive, so he brushed it off and kept working. Still, he couldn't shake the feeling that people were beginning to see him not as a teammate, but as the guy with the accent. One afternoon, while everyone was gathered for a brainstorming session, Ravi shared a new campaign idea. It involved a community-driven approach, something he had used successfully in his previous job. As he explained the concept, Lisa interrupted him. "That's interesting, but I think we should let someone else handle the creative part for now," she said with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Then, in a slightly exaggerated tone, she repeated his last sentence with his accent. Everyone laughed again. Ravi froze. His face burned, but he forced a small laugh too. He didn't want to cause a scene. Inside, though, something cracked a little. He realized that no matter how hard he tried, people might still judge him for how he sounded, not what he said. Later that evening, when the office was quiet, Ravi sat alone at his desk. The glow from his monitor reflected in his tired eyes. He thought about home, about his mother who had always told him, "Your words are worth more than the way you speak them." He missed hearing her voice. He missed the comfort of being understood without having to prove himself. He decided not to give up. If they couldn't see his worth yet, he would make sure his work spoke for him. The next day, he arrived even earlier. He started preparing reports for upcoming clients, carefully checking every number and suggestion. He wanted to make sure that when he presented something, it would be so strong that no one could laugh at him. As days turned into weeks, Ravi's dedication began to show. His reports were detailed, his campaigns creative, and his results impressive. Even Lisa began to rely on his notes when preparing her presentations, but she rarely gave him credit. Sometimes she would even tell others, "I guided him through that project," when in truth Ravi had done most of the work himself. Despite that, he stayed calm. He didn't believe in complaining. He believed in patience and persistence. One Friday afternoon, a few coworkers invited him to lunch. They chatted casually, and one of them said, "Hey Ravi, your accent is kinda cool. Where are you from again?" He smiled and told them about his hometown, about the food, the culture, and how he used to work at an international company there. They listened with mild interest, then changed the subject. It wasn't mean, but it reminded him that they didn't really see him yet. Over the next few days, Ravi noticed how some people began to mimic certain words he used. It was done in a playful way, but it made him feel small. He would walk past a few co-workers and hear a word he often said, repeated in a joking tone. When he turned, they would smile innocently, pretending it was nothing. He kept quiet, though it hurt deeply. It wasn't just about the words, it was the reminder that he didn't belong fully. One day, during a team meeting, Lisa asked him to share his progress on a client project. He stood up, took a breath, and started explaining his findings. Halfway through, Lisa interrupted, pretending not to understand him. "Wait, could you slow down? I can't catch all of that," she said, smiling as she looked around the room. A few people chuckled. Ravi's voice faltered, but he continued anyway, finishing his report clearly and respectfully. When he sat down, no one said a word. The silence was heavy. After the meeting, one of the interns quietly approached him and said, "You did great. I understood everything." Ravi smiled faintly. That small act of kindness stayed with him. That evening, as he left the office, he walked past a cafe window and saw his reflection. He looked tired, older than he felt, but there was also a quiet strength in his eyes. He whispered to himself, "Don't let them change who you are." He knew he couldn't control what others thought, but he could control how he responded. He spent the weekend working on a new campaign idea, something bold and unique. He didn't tell anyone about it yet. He wanted it to be perfect before showing it to the team. It was his way of proving that he was more than the jokes and the laughter, that behind the accent was a mind that understood people, markets, and possibilities. When Monday came, Ravi walked into the office early as usual. The cleaning staff greeted him warmly. They liked how respectful he always was. He smiled back, feeling a bit lighter. He sat at his desk, opened his laptop, and started refining his idea. Outside, the city was waking up and the light slowly filled the office space. In that quiet moment, before anyone else arrived, Ravi felt something shift inside him. He was no longer trying to fit in. He was simply doing what he loved the way he knew best. He didn't need to sound like everyone else, he just needed to be heard. And deep down, he believed that one day, he would be. By the time the rest of the team arrived, he had already finished a detailed presentation draft. As he saved the file, he smiled faintly. The laughter, the mocking, the doubt, it all pushed him to work harder. He wasn't angry anymore. He was focused. What he didn't know was that this quiet strength, this calm persistence, was about to change everything. The same people who laughed at his accent would soon be listening carefully to every word he said. But for now, he just kept typing, unaware that his story was only beginning to unfold. The next few weeks passed quickly. Ravi kept himself busy, working quietly at his desk while others chatted and laughed around him. He didn't join many conversations, not because he didn't want to, but because he never felt completely welcome. Still, he remained polite and professional, always ready to help when someone asked. His calm and respectful manner made some coworkers appreciate him, though most still didn't really know who he was beyond his soft-spoken voice and thick accent. One morning, the office was buzzing with excitement. Lisa had just announced that their team would present a new marketing proposal to one of the company's biggest clients. It was a huge opportunity and everyone wanted to impress. Ravi had spent days working on the strategy. He stayed late every night going through research, designing visuals, and writing notes. When the presentation draft was finally ready, he shared it with Lisa. She looked through it briefly and nodded. "Good work," she said. "I'll make a few changes, but we'll use this as our base." Ravi smiled, grateful for her approval, even though he noticed she barely looked at the parts where his notes were most detailed. He didn't say anything. He just wanted the team to succeed. What mattered to him was the result, not the credit. The day of the presentation came. Everyone dressed sharply, the meeting room filled with coffee cups, laptops, and the low hum of nervous chatter. Lisa stood at the front of the room, arranging her slides. "All right, everyone," she said confidently. "We'll make a great impression today. Ravi, since you worked on the main concept, why don't you start the presentation?" Ravi felt a quick rush of surprise. He hadn't expected to speak first, especially not in front of the client. But he took a breath, stood up, and walked to the front of the room. He adjusted the microphone slightly and began to speak, his voice calm but nervous. "Good morning, everyone. I'm happy to share our campaign proposal." Before he could continue, Lisa interrupted with a forced laugh. "Don't worry if you don't catch everything," she said, glancing at the client. "Ravi has a bit of an accent, but his ideas are great." The client chuckled lightly, unsure how to respond. "A few team..." Members laughed softly. Ravi froze for half a second, then continued speaking as if he hadn't heard. His hands trembled slightly, but his voice stayed steady. He explained his ideas with confidence, pointing to each slide, describing how their campaign could connect emotionally with the audience. Despite the awkward start, the client seemed interested, nodding along. But midway through, Lisa interrupted again. "Hold on, Ravi," she said, smiling. "Let me just rephrase that for clarity." She repeated his sentence but changed his words slightly. The client nodded again. Ravi stepped back, feeling small. By the end of the presentation, Ravi had barely spoken a few sentences without being cut off. When it was over, Lisa received praise for the team's work. The client said, "That was impressive." "Lisa, great strategy." She smiled proudly and said, "Thank you. It was a team effort." But everyone knew she had taken the spotlight. After the meeting, as people left the room, Lisa turned to Ravi and said jokingly, "Next time, maybe practice your pronunciation a bit. It'll help." She said it with a laugh as if it were a friendly suggestion, but the tone wasn't friendly at all. Ravi simply nodded. "I'll work on it," he said quietly. When the office emptied, he sat alone in the meeting room, staring at the screen. His chest felt heavy, his thoughts scattered. He had worked so hard, but in a few careless moments, his manager had made him feel like an outsider again. The laughter from earlier echoed in his mind. He tried not to let it affect him, but it did. That night, when he got home, he couldn't eat. He opened his laptop and read over his slides again. Every sentence was clear. Every idea was solid. There was nothing wrong with his English, only the way people chose to hear it. For the first time, he wondered if working quietly was really the right approach. He had stayed silent to avoid conflict, but maybe his silence made others believe he didn't care. The next morning, when Ravi entered the office, a few coworkers glanced at him awkwardly. They had seen what happened and felt uncomfortable. One of them, a kind woman named Olivia, stopped by his desk. "Hey," she said softly. "You did really well yesterday. Don't let it bother you. People can be thoughtless sometimes." Ravi smiled gratefully. "Thank you," he said. It was a small kindness, but it meant a lot. Later that day, Lisa called for a short meeting. The client had loved the proposal and wanted to move forward. Everyone clapped. Lisa smiled and said, "Great job, team. Let's prepare the next phase. Ravi, I'll need your report by tomorrow morning." He nodded, pretending nothing was wrong. Over the next few weeks, the team worked hard on the project. Ravi's ideas continued to shine, even if his name wasn't mentioned. But slowly, small changes began to happen. A few people started coming to him for help because they realized he knew what he was doing. They saw that behind his quiet nature was someone who understood details better than anyone else. He was patient, kind, and always willing to help without judgment. One day, the company organized a small event for employees to share cultural dishes from their home countries. Ravi decided to bring a simple traditional meal that reminded him of his childhood. When he set it on the table, people gathered around, curious. They tasted it and smiled. "This is amazing," one said. Another added, "Ravi, you should cook for us more often." He laughed softly, feeling warmth for the first time in weeks. It was a small moment, but it made him feel human again, not just the guy with the accent. Later that afternoon, Lisa passed by his desk and said, "Hey, that food was really good. I didn't know you could cook." Ravi smiled and replied, "Thank you. It's something I enjoy doing." She nodded and walked away. For a second, her tone almost sounded genuine, but the peace didn't last long. A few days later, another team meeting was scheduled. Ravi had once again done most of the work for a new client proposal. When the meeting started, Lisa said, "Ravi, why don't you start us off again?" He hesitated for a moment, but stood up anyway. This time he felt more confident. He had practiced the night before, rehearsing each point carefully. He spoke clearly, showing charts, explaining strategies, and connecting each idea with data. For the first few minutes, everything went smoothly. The team listened attentively. But then, as he was explaining one of the final slides, Lisa leaned back in her chair and whispered something to the person beside her. A few people laughed quietly. Ravi noticed but didn't stop. Then Lisa said loudly, "You know, Ravi, you should consider being a voice actor with that accent. It's very unique." The room filled with laughter. Ravi stood still. The words felt like a slap. He forced a small smile and finished his sentence calmly. But this time the hurt ran deeper. When the meeting ended, he gathered his papers quietly and left the room. The laughter still echoed behind him. That evening, he walked to a small park near his apartment. The air was cool, and the city lights reflected on the river. He sat on a bench and watched the water move. For a long time, he didn't think of work or projects or reports. He just thought about his journey, how far he had come, and how easily people forgot to look beyond appearances. He thought about calling his family but decided not to worry them. Instead, he whispered softly, "I'll make them see. One day they'll understand." His eyes were tired, but his spirit wasn't broken. Deep inside, something stronger was growing, a quiet determination to prove that kindness, patience, and talent could rise above mockery. When he returned home that night, he opened his laptop and began writing again. He started drafting a new strategy for another client, something fresh and bold. This time, he didn't plan to stay in the background. He decided that the next chance he got, he would stand tall, speak clearly, and let his work shine no matter who laughed. What Ravi didn't realize was that his moment to be seen was closer than he thought. The same people who once laughed would soon be looking to him for answers when everything went wrong. But for now, he kept typing, the quiet click of the keys echoing through his small apartment as he prepared for the day the truth would finally come out. The next few weeks at the office were tense. Everyone was busy working on the company's biggest project of the year, a huge campaign for a major client that could make or break the firm's reputation. Deadlines were tight, meetings ran late, and stress was written on everyone's faces. Even Lisa, who always looked confident, seemed restless. She often walked around with her phone pressed to her ear, whispering orders, snapping at people, and frowning at her screen. Ravi stayed quiet through it all. He worked from early morning until late at night, often skipping lunch to meet deadlines. His ideas were being used in the campaign, though no one said it directly. He didn't mind much. He just wanted the company to succeed. But deep down, he still remembered how it felt to be laughed at, how his words were twisted into jokes. He promised himself that he wouldn't let anger or pride distract him. His focus was on doing the job right. One Monday morning, as everyone gathered in the conference room, Lisa walked in looking pale. She placed her laptop on the table and sighed heavily. "We have a problem," she said. The room fell silent. "The client isn't happy with our current results. The campaign performance is dropping, and they've asked for an urgent meeting tomorrow. They're threatening to pull out if we can't fix this." Everyone began whispering nervously. Losing that client would be a disaster. Lisa rubbed her temples and said, "We need a new strategy, something that can turn this around fast." She looked around the room for ideas. People started talking, throwing out random suggestions, but none of them seemed strong enough. The pressure was too high. Ravi sat quietly, thinking. He had been analyzing the campaign numbers for days and already had a few ideas on how to improve it. But he hesitated to speak. After all, every time he had tried before, he had been interrupted or mocked. Still, he couldn't just stay silent now. The company's reputation and everyone's jobs were at stake. He raised his hand slightly and said, "I think I may have a solution." Everyone turned toward him. Lisa crossed her arms, her expression unreadable. "All right, go ahead," she said. Ravi stood up, opened his folder, and began explaining. His voice was calm and steady, though his heart was racing. He showed graphs, explained patterns, and described how they could change their approach to reach the target audience better. His plan was clear, logical, and full of small but powerful ideas. At first, Lisa looked impatient. But as Ravi continued, her expression slowly changed. The room grew quiet. Everyone was listening. When he finished, he looked up, unsure what to expect. There was silence for a moment. Then one of the senior analysts spoke. "That actually makes sense," he said. Another person nodded. "If we follow that plan, we might be able to recover the campaign." Lisa hesitated, clearly uncomfortable admitting that Ravi's idea was good. Finally, she said, "All right, we'll test it. Ravi, send me the details by tonight." Her tone was flat, but it was still a small victory for him. He nodded and went back to his desk. That night, Ravi stayed at the office long after everyone left. He worked tirelessly, refining his plan, checking every number twice. The office was quiet except for the sound of his keyboard. Around midnight, he emailed the complete report to Lisa and leaned back in his chair. He looked out the window at the city lights, feeling both exhausted and hopeful. The next morning, Lisa presented the new strategy to the client using Ravi's work as the foundation. The client loved it. They agreed to continue with the firm, impressed by the quick turnaround and fresh approach. Everyone in the office celebrated, clapping and cheering. Lisa smiled proudly as she announced, "Crisis averted. Great work, team." She didn't mention Ravi's name, but he didn't care. He just felt relieved that his idea had saved the project. However, word spread quietly around the office that it was Ravi's plan that had impressed the client. A few co-workers approached him later and said things like, "I heard it was your strategy that saved us." "Nice work, man." Ravi smiled modestly. "Just doing my part," he said. But inside, a small sense of pride bloomed. Maybe finally people were beginning to see his worth. Later that afternoon, the director of the company called a sudden meeting. Everyone gathered, curious. The director walked in with a smile and said, "I just received a message from the client. They were extremely happy with the new direction and want us to handle their next major project as well." Applause filled the room. Then he added, "I was told that one of our team members came up with this new strategy. Ravi, could you come forward?" Ravi froze for a moment. He hadn't expected that. Slowly, he stood and walked to the front. The director shook his hand. "Excellent work," he said warmly. "You've done something remarkable. Keep it up." Everyone clapped again. Lisa looked stunned but forced a smile. Ravi thanked the director humbly and sat down, trying to hide his nervous excitement. After the meeting, Lisa approached him. "Good job," she said quickly. Her voice was polite, but her eyes revealed something else, unease. For the first time, she had been outshined by the very person she used to mock. Ravi simply nodded and said, "Thank you." Over the next few days, things began to shift. Co-workers started treating him differently. People asked for his input more often, and his opinions were taken seriously. He still spoke softly, but now people listened. Lisa, however, seemed distant. She avoided unnecessary conversations with him and often delegated his work to others, though she couldn't deny his talent anymore. One evening, as everyone was packing up, the director called Lisa into his office. Ravi stayed late as usual, finishing up reports. When Lisa came out, she looked tense. She walked past him without a word. Later, he learned that the director had recommended Ravi to lead a small task force for an upcoming project. It wasn't a promotion yet, but it was a step toward leadership. He couldn't believe it. Things were finally changing. The following week, the director asked Ravi to join a meeting with senior staff. It was the first time he'd been in a room with top-level managers. He sat quietly at first, observing how everyone discussed strategies and figures. Then, when asked for his thoughts, he spoke clearly, explaining his approach in a way that impressed everyone. The director nodded approvingly. "You have a sharp mind, Ravi," he said. "We need people like you here." When the meeting ended, Ravi walked out feeling a mix of joy and disbelief. Just a few months ago, he had been mocked for his accent. Now his voice was being respected, but he didn't let the attention change him. He still greeted everyone kindly, still helped others when they struggled, still stayed late to double-check details. He believed in quiet, hard work. That evening, Lisa stood by the office window looking thoughtful. She watched Ravi talking to a few co-workers who were thanking him for his help. Something about that scene stayed with her. For the first time, she seemed to realize that the man she had ridiculed had done more for the company than anyone else. But fate had another test waiting. A few days later, the main client faced a sudden issue with their international branch, and they asked the company to send a representative to handle it directly. The director turned to Ravi. "You have the best understanding of this campaign. Would you be willing to take charge?" Ravi was surprised but agreed without hesitation. Lisa watched silently as Ravi prepared for the trip. She wanted to say something, maybe wish him luck, but couldn't find the words. Deep down, she knew this was the moment that would define everything. If he succeeded, he would become one of the most respected employees in the firm, and her own behavior toward him would look even worse. The next morning, as Ravi boarded the plane with a small folder in his bag and quiet confidence in his heart, he didn't think about revenge or pride. He thought about how far he had come, how much he had endured, and how this opportunity was his chance to show the world who he really was. Not through how he spoke, but through what he did. And as the city disappeared below the clouds, he smiled faintly to himself, unaware that the truth about him and everything he had faced was about to come to light in ways no one at the office could have imagined. Ravi's flight landed early in the morning. As he stepped out of the airport, the sun was just rising, painting the city in a soft golden light. The streets were busy, the air buzzing with energy. He felt nervous but also excited. This was the biggest responsibility he had ever been given. The company had trusted him to meet the international clients face to face, to fix a situation that could affect millions. He carried only a small suitcase, his laptop, and a quiet determination in his heart. When he arrived at the client's office, he was welcomed politely but with cautious eyes. They had heard about the campaign problems and were not sure if anyone could fix them. But when Ravi started explaining the plan he had built, their doubts slowly faded. He spoke with confidence and calmness. He didn't rush his words. His accent was still there, strong and clear, but now it carried weight. Every sentence had meaning. Every idea was backed with evidence. By the end of the meeting, the clients were nodding and smiling. One of them said, "You've just saved this project." That night, Ravi sat in his hotel room looking out at the city lights. He finally allowed himself to breathe. He had done it. The plan had worked perfectly. The next day, the client's office sent an official message of appreciation to his company, praising Ravi for his professionalism and deep understanding of global markets. The director back home was thrilled. He immediately called Lisa and told her the news. Lisa felt a mix of surprise and unease. She congratulated the director but couldn't ignore the feeling in her chest. The same man she used to tease and interrupt was now the one saving the company's reputation. When she told the team, everyone cheered. "That's amazing," someone said. "Ravi's incredible." For once, people didn't laugh when his name was mentioned. They respected it. A few days later, Ravi returned to the office. When he walked in, his coworkers clapped and welcomed him warmly. He smiled modestly, thanking them all. Lisa was standing near the door, watching silently. For a moment, she didn't know what to say. She wanted to apologize right there, but pride held her back. Instead, she said softly, "Good job, Ravi. The client was really impressed." He nodded and replied kindly, "Thank you. I'm glad everything worked out." Over the next few weeks, things started changing at the office. The director began involving Ravi in more meetings with senior executives. He often asked for his advice and made sure others heard his input. People started to notice how well he handled pressure, how calmly he approached every problem. His name came up often in positive conversations. Some even started calling him the problem solver. One afternoon, a large meeting was scheduled with several international partners visiting from abroad. Lisa was in charge of organizing it, but she was nervous. These meetings were crucial, and one wrong move could ruin everything. The director asked Ravi to attend as well, saying, "Your experience will be valuable here." Ravi agreed, unaware that this meeting would completely change how everyone saw him. When the meeting began, the room was filled with executives from different countries. The discussion started smoothly, but soon one of the guests raised a complex issue regarding the campaign's global reach. Lisa tried to respond, but the question involved multiple cultural markets that she didn't fully understand. She stumbled through her answer. The guest frowned, clearly dissatisfied. Ravi, who was sitting quietly, raised his hand and asked politely if he could add something. The director nodded. Ravi stood up and walked to the front of the room. He explained the issue in detail, offering clear, practical solutions. Then, to everyone's surprise, he switched languages mid-sentence, first speaking in fluent French to one executive, then moving to Spanish for another, and finally finishing in English. The entire room went silent. Lisa's eyes widened. The guests looked impressed, smiling and nodding. One of them said, "I didn't realize your company had someone with such international experience." The director smiled proudly. "Yes," he said. "Ravi has been with us for a while. He's an asset." The rest of the meeting went perfectly. When it ended, the international team shook hands with Ravi and thanked him personally. Some even asked for his card. As the guests left, the director turned to Lisa and said, "Now that's what I call professionalism. You're lucky to have someone like him on your team." Lisa forced a small smile but couldn't ignore the truth anymore. For the first time, she saw the full picture. The man she once mocked for his accent spoke 3 languages fluently, understood global markets better than anyone in the room, and carried himself with quiet dignity. It wasn't just skill, it was grace. Later that evening, as most employees left, Lisa stayed back at her desk thinking. She remembered all the times she had cut Ravi off in meetings, the jokes she made at his expense, the laughter she encouraged. She felt a heavy weight of guilt pressing on her chest. How many times had she tried to make him feel small just to boost her own ego? Now she realized that he had been stronger than she ever was. Ravi passed by her desk to drop off some files. "Long day," he said kindly. "You should rest." His tone was calm and polite, with no trace of bitterness. Lisa looked up, wanting to speak but unable to find the words. "Ravi," she finally said softly, "can we talk tomorrow?" He nodded with a smile. Of course. That night, Lisa couldn't sleep. She kept thinking about the meeting, the way he spoke with such confidence, how the guests listened to him, how effortlessly he had handled everything. She realized that all this time she had been judging him for the wrong reasons. She had confused an accent with lack of ability, and now she understood how unfair that had been. The next morning, Lisa arrived early, waiting for Ravi. When he came in, she stood up and said, "Can we go to the meeting room for a minute?" He agreed. Once they were alone, she took a deep breath. "I owe you an apology," she said. Ravi looked surprised. "You don't need to," he replied gently. But she shook her head. "No, I do. I've been wrong about you from the start. I made fun of your accent. I interrupted you. I took credit for your ideas and I disrespected you. You didn't deserve any of that. I'm truly sorry." For a moment, Ravi didn't say anything. Then he smiled, not out of pride, but understanding. "It's okay, Lisa. Everyone makes mistakes. What matters is what we learn from them." His words were calm, without anger. Lisa felt her throat tighten. "You're a better person than I am," she said quietly. He shook his head. "No, I've just been where people didn't understand me before. I know how it feels. I wouldn't want anyone else to feel that way." After that conversation, the atmosphere in the office slowly began to change. Lisa became more patient, more respectful to everyone, especially new employees who spoke differently. She encouraged Ravi to lead more meetings and often asked for his input. The team noticed her change and followed her example. The office started to feel warmer, more welcoming, more human. Weeks later, during a company-wide gathering, the director announced something that caught everyone by surprise. "I'm pleased to share that Ravi will be leading our new international division," he said proudly. The room erupted in applause. Ravi stood up, humbled and grateful. Lisa clapped the loudest, smiling sincerely this time. When the event ended, Lisa approached him and said, "You earned this." "I'm really proud of you." Ravi nodded, smiling. "Thank you. It means a lot coming from you." There was no bitterness in his voice, only kindness. As the office lights dimmed that evening, Lisa stood by the window watching Ravi pack up his things. She felt a quiet respect for him, a man who had faced mockery with patience, insult with dignity, and ignorance with understanding. And for the first time, she was grateful that she had learned from him. Ravi walked out of the office that night with a peaceful smile. The world hadn't changed overnight, but he had changed how people saw it. He had shown them that strength doesn't always shout. It often speaks softly through kindness, persistence, and humility. Months passed after Ravi's promotion, and everything in the office seemed brighter. The new international division was running smoothly under his leadership. He handled every challenge with calm confidence, earning respect not just from his team but from clients across the world. For many employees, he had become a symbol of patience and quiet strength. Even those who once doubted him now looked up to him for guidance. Lisa had also changed. She was no longer the overconfident, dismissive manager she used to be. Working closely with Ravi taught her humility and understanding. She learned to listen, not just to words but to people's feelings behind them. Sometimes she would smile at herself, thinking how life had flipped the roles, how the person she once mocked had become her mentor in many ways. One morning, the director called a meeting with the senior staff. "We have been approached by a global firm," he announced. "They want us to collaborate on a project that will reach multiple countries. It's a massive opportunity, but also a test for our team, and I believe Ravi should lead it." Everyone nodded in agreement. Ravi looked calm, but deep inside he felt the weight of the responsibility. This was the biggest project of his life. After the meeting, Ravi stayed back in the conference room, going through files and charts. Lisa walked in with 2 cups of coffee. "You're going to do great," she said, handing him one. He smiled. "Thank you. It's just big. I don't want to let anyone down. She looked at him and said, You won't. You never do. It was genuine. He appreciated that. Over the next few weeks, Ravi worked day and night with his team. He didn't command them. He guided them. He listened to everyone's ideas, whether they were senior or junior. His calmness made the long hours easier for everyone. Sometimes he'd bring snacks for the night shift or make small jokes to keep the mood light. People wanted to give their best because they felt respected. One evening, as the team was wrapping up late, Lisa stopped by his desk. Do you ever get tired? She asked, half smiling. He laughed softly. Of course, but I remind myself why I started. I wanted to prove that kindness and hard work can speak louder than anything else. She nodded quietly, admiring how genuine he was. There was something peaceful about the way he saw the world. When the final presentation day arrived, the office was buzzing with energy. Representatives from the global firm had flown in to see Ravi's team present their proposal. The director was confident but visibly nervous. This deal could take their company to another level. The meeting started. Lisa introduced the project briefly, then handed the floor to Ravi. He stood at the front, adjusting his tie slightly, and looked around the room. There was no sign of fear in his eyes, only focus. As he spoke, the clients leaned forward, listening intently. His words were clear and steady. He explained the vision, the strategy, and the future potential of their partnership. He spoke from the heart, not with fancy words, but with honesty and understanding. Halfway through, one of the clients asked a tough question, challenging their marketing approach. Ravi paused for a second, smiled, and said, That's a great question. Then he broke down the answer in simple terms, connecting it to real-world examples. His calm tone made even the most skeptical guest nod in agreement. Lisa watched from the side, proud and a little emotional. She remembered the day she once interrupted him during a meeting, thinking he wasn't capable of handling pressure. Now he was handling a global panel like it was nothing. When the presentation ended, the room was silent for a moment. Then the head client stood up and began to clap. The others joined in. This, he said, is exactly the kind of leadership we want to work with. The director looked relieved. Lisa's eyes welled up with happy tears. Ravi simply smiled and bowed his head slightly. Thank you, he said quietly. Later that evening, after the guests left, the director gathered the team. We did it, he said proudly. And we couldn't have done it without Ravi's leadership. The whole office erupted in cheers. Ravi looked around at his team, each face glowing with happiness, and said, It wasn't just me. It was all of us. Every idea, every late night, every small effort, it all mattered. The sincerity in his voice made everyone feel proud of what they'd built together. After the celebration, Lisa found Ravi alone near the balcony, looking at the city lights. You really did it, she said softly. No, he replied, smiling. We did. She laughed quietly. Still humble, even after saving the company twice, he shrugged. Titles and achievements don't mean much if we forget to stay kind. She nodded. You're right. You've changed the way this office works. The way I think. They stood there in silence for a while, just listening to the sound of the city below. Finally, Lisa said, I want to tell you something. Before you joined, I thought success meant being loud, being noticed, always having the last word. But watching you taught me something different. You showed me that respect earns loyalty. That quiet strength changes people more than pride ever could. Ravi didn't respond right away. He just smiled and said, Sometimes the world doesn't need louder voices, it needs better listeners. From that day, the company culture shifted even more. The team started holding open sessions where everyone could share ideas freely, no matter their accent or background. People felt valued. New employees joined with confidence, knowing their voices mattered. It became a place of inclusion, understanding, and growth. And every person who walked through those doors eventually heard the story of how one man changed the company, not with power, but with patience. Months later, Ravi received an email from the head of the global firm. They wanted him to speak at an international leadership conference. It was an honor few received. When he told the director, everyone was thrilled. Lisa smiled and said, You're going to inspire so many people out there. Ravi laughed lightly. If my story helps even one person feel confident in who they are, that's enough. The day of the conference arrived. The hall was packed with hundreds of professionals from around the world. Ravi stepped up to Tall's podium, looking calm and collected. As he began to speak, he shared his journey, not with fancy phrases, but with genuine emotion. He talked about the time he was mocked for his accent, about how it made him doubt himself, and how he learned that true respect comes from understanding, not judgment. He looked around the room and said, "We live in a world full of different voices. Each accent, each tone carries a story. Instead of mocking them, we should listen. Because understanding someone else's story might just change our own." The crowd went silent for a few seconds, then erupted into applause. Some people stood up, clapping with admiration. Ravi smiled humbly and stepped back from the microphone. In that moment, he didn't feel like the man who had once been teased. He felt like someone who had finally found his voice. After the conference, a young man approached him nervously. "Sir," he said, "I have a strong accent too. People sometimes make fun of it. But after hearing you, I feel proud of how I speak. Thank you." Ravi smiled and put a hand on his shoulder. "Never let anyone make you feel small for being yourself," he said gently. "Your voice is your story. Don't change it for the world." When he returned to the office a few days later, the whole team surprised him with a small celebration. There were balloons, laughter, and cake. Lisa raised a glass and said, "To Ravi, the man who taught us that strength doesn't come from being loud, but from being true." Everyone cheered. As the lights dimmed and the party ended, Ravi looked around the room. The same office that once echoed with laughter at his expense was now filled with warmth, kindness, and respect. He felt grateful not just for success, but for the journey that led him there. Sometimes, he thought, life doesn't change through big moments, but through small ones like standing up for yourself, staying kind when others aren't, or forgiving people who once hurt you. And as he walked out that night under the soft glow of the streetlights, he knew one thing for sure. Being true to who you are is the strongest voice you can ever have.